The Nintendo Entertainment System! Easily one of the most popular gaming consoles of all time, it gave birth to some of gaming's most popular franchises that continue to this very day, such as Mario, Mega Man, Zelda, Metroid, Castlevania, Dragon Quest, Metal Gear, and Final Fantasy, just to name a few. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't born in the heyday of the system, so I never got a chance to buy the NES. Yeah, it's kind of sad. Luckily, thanks to the proliferation of retro gaming services and increased awareness in this old school awesomeness, I've gotten a chance to play some NES games. Like, not that many, but a few. Fortunately, this means I didn't, play most of the popular ones. I've never finished Super Mario Bros. 3. Yeah, you might as well crucify me now. Or The Legend of Zelda. So, for this tribute, instead of, listing some of my most favorite all of my favorite NES games, I'm just going to talk about two of my favorite franchises on the NES, which I have played a lot of, Castlevania and Mega Man. So, on to the talk. Released in 1986, Castlevania is one of the more beloved NES games. It's not hard to see why. One of the main draws of the game was that you could fight monsters from all of your favorite action movies, like the Grim Reaper, Dracula, and Frankenstein, in the same game. When it was first released, the game was one of the more complex games on NES because it had a lot more power-ups than they usually did, more than Spelunker anyways, and some rather detailed graphics. The art style really conveys the feeling that you're traveling across this decorated castle with destroyed walls and all of the architecture seemingly out of place, like those ladders that are just hanging in the air. The music is definitely some of the best on the NES, with some rocking tunes that are still in Castlevania games this very day. The gameplay is just sublime because it looks so boring, like if you just watch videos or something, but when you play it, it's quite fun. The levels were designed in such a way that there's always a way of going through them without getting hurt, but it can be a bit obtuse at times. And the game really caught on with the American psych in the way that it failed to do with the Japanese, because Castlevania games don't really sell that well in Japan, even to this day, but they sell pretty well here, at least, besides flops like Judgment. 2 years later, Konami followed up on the original Castlevania with the sequel Simon's Quest, which followed in the bizarre NES tradition of having a sequel that's nothing like the game that followed up on. Some examples are Donkey Kong, Final Fantasy, The Legend of Zelda, Super Mario Bros., TMNT, Tetris. So that's enough. And instead of being a standard action game like the first, it took more influence from Metroid. So gone was the straight left-to-right action games from the first. It's replaced by a much bigger world, items to collect, and towns to explore in. And the game was basically, though, go to town, explore, get everything you need, go to a castle, get a part of Dracula, and then go to the next town, rinse and repeat. The problem with this game was that it could be a bit obtuse at where you needed to go at times and how you could get there. The infamous tornado thing where you have to kneel at this corner for 6 seconds with a specific item, and a tornado will come up, and you can finally go to the next area. And the graphics were improved from the first game, Simon's actually not made out of all browns in this one, but it's hard to tell because it was much more repetitive than the first, because a lot of games that were like it, like Metroid and Goonies 2, also had that kind of flaw. But it's still a pretty fun game. It had a leveling system, so you get more powerful with each level, so it made it a lot easier to play through than the first game. And there were a lot more sub-weapons that you could get, from the awesome diamond that would bounce around everything like a rubber ball, killing everything in its path, to the golden dagger, which was pretty much... it was like your whip, but it can go further, so it's much better than the dagger from the first game. And you can even get upgrades to it, like the awesome flame whip, which make an interesting return in Rondo Blood and Symphony Night, which Richter would use. And while it was somewhat flawed, Castlevania 2 is still a pretty fun game. It's something any self-respecting NES owner should give a try, or someone who has a Wii and Virtual Console, like I did. Released about a year before Castlevania's debut on the Super NES, Super Castlevania 4, Castlevania 3 was definitely one of the last games to be released on the system, or at least one of the last games for a major franchise. This was when developers had really figured out like how to use the NES, like its special quirks and stuff, and how to maximize the potential of it. So, like in Japan, for example, they used a special chip, the VR66, to give it improved graphics and sound quality. But since Nintendo of America didn't allow developers to do this, or at least most, I think they let Sunsoft use special chips in their games. So the NES version had to use one of Nintendo's standard chips, like standard but still better than the ordinary, the MMC5. So it didn't offer the same improvements as the Japanese counterpart, but still like has great graphics for the NES and music too. And it regressed from like Castlevania 2's like super innovative thing with like for Castlevania anyways, and it went back to the Castlevania 1 kind of gameplay, but still pretty original because it not only did offer like a huge number of stages, like more than twice than double the first game, but it had more playable characters. So you could only bring one character with you at a time, so it had more replay value because you couldn't like go through all 15 stages at once. You had to, there were branching paths. And it also had multiple endings, so it was pretty awesome and definitely what most people would consider the best game on the NES the best Castlevania game on the NES. So back in the NES days when Konami and Capcom were neck and neck, always trying to one-up each other, like be it with their licensed games like Chip and Dale vs. Monster in My Pocket, or 2D action games like Castlevania vs. Mega Man. I can't say which one is better, but I can say they're both awesome games. And they both started on the NES. Well, Castlevania kind of started on the MSX, but that's a different point. So like Castlevania, Mega Man was one of the earlier NES games, and it was pretty innovative for the time. You could choose any 6 of the Robot Master stages from the get-go, which was pretty non-linear for an early NES game. Later NES games became one. And you could pick weapons from the Robot Masters, each weapon being strong against another Robot Master, so it's kind of like rock, paper, scissors. And it made for a pretty awesome system, and some weapons even had cool secondary functions, like the Ice Shot being able to freeze enemies, or the fire columns, or the Thunder Beam's ability to kill hard-to-reach enemies, or enemies that are hard to kill with like the normal Mega Buster. I don't know what I'm saying. But it's not as detailed as its sequels, but it's still a pretty good game and definitely worth giving a try. But while Mega Man was fantastic, its sequel definitely improved on pretty much everything the original did, and was the basis for the next 4 Mega Man games on the NES, because they had the same improved graphics. Like Mega Man 1 had these weird items, so Mega Man 2 changed that, and all the later Mega Man games on the NES and Mega Man 9 and 10 also did that. And it's just much more detailed and it's a lot prettier to look at. Like it has a lot of varied environments, so you never feel like you're going through the same thing for a long period of time. Besides maybe the final levels, because they're all the same like futuristic sort of thing. And the enemies were also much better, as they were more cartoonish and better animated than the first game. Also had some huge enemies, which showed the power of the NES. I'd also say that Mega Man 2 has the best soundtrack of the NES, which will probably get people trying to kill me, but it had a wide variety of tunes that are all really nice to listen to, especially the famous Wily 1 theme. One of the most impressive things about Mega Man 2 was its balance. Each of the levels were perfectly balanced and never felt unfair or cheap. Well, except for a certain boss fight near the end of the game, which is just a bitch. They were just a joy to go through. An understated achievement of Mega Man 2 was it managed to make each and every one of the special weapons useful for more than their intended take out the boss that's weak against function. Like the bubble lead It could show you where the invisible platforms are on Wily stage, or the time stopper could save your ass from the beams in Quickman stage. The crash bomber could destroy certain walls, which is necessary against a certain cheap boss. So Mega Man 2 is quite simply a masterpiece and one of the best platformers of all time, and definitely one of the better ones on the NES. So how could one follow up the amazing Mega Man 2? Well, the first Mega Man wasn't a success, so the sequel was made on the development team's own time, which will explain why it was so amazing, because it was more of a labor of love than out of the company wanting money. So when Mega Man 2 was an incredible success, the company obviously wanted money, so they asked Inafune, the director, to make a sequel, and he was probably more than happy to. I mean, because to this day he constantly talks about Mega Man 2 being his favorite game. So Mega Man 3 feels like the end of the trilogy, and was the logical last Mega Man game on the NES, seeing as there wasn't really much more Capcom to do to improve the formula, like within the 8-bit limitations. But they did try to, because there were 3 more sequels on the NES, which is quite a lot. For one thing, like Mega Man 3, it introduced Rush, which let you, at the beginning you could like jump higher with Rush Coil. You could also later swim with Rush Marine and glide about with Rush Jet, which was really helpful, and it really added to the gameplay and made it feel more open-ended, because you could like explore all around these levels instead of Mega Man's limited jump thing. And then the best thing that I liked about Mega Man 3 was the slide dash, which not only gave you an extra method of dodging things, but helped you get through like these certain tight spaces, which the other Mega Man games didn't have, to be fair, but it was still pretty cool. And Mega Man 3 also had some other interesting gimmicks, not in a bad way, but such as the ability to like go through a remix versions of like stages that you've already been through. After you beat the first 8 stages, you can fight all of the 8 robot masters from Mega Man 2, but you have to decide which one of your new weapons is good against these old bosses. So I thought that was pretty cool. And it also was the debut of Proto Man, would sometimes help you and sometimes fight you, depending on what schizophrenic mood he was at the time. I mean, I know he's supposed to be like working with Dr. Wily and then he later turns good, but you can go through the stages at any order you want, so that's not always the case. But anyways, despite storyline, Mega Man 3 was an amazing game, one of the better platformers on the NES, which wasn't really easy because the NES had a lot of platformers. I bet a lot of the other 25th anniversary videos talk about a lot of the NES platformers. But anyways, that's my tribute to the NES. Certainly not what the system deserved, because it had a huge library of games that had much more than Castlevania and Mega Man, and a lot of games that were nothing like them. And I would love to be in a position to talk about all of the obscure gems for the NES, like The Guardian Legend, Reika's Summer Carnival 93, Clash of Demon Head, Crystalis, Super Mario Bros. 3. What an obscure gem. Dragon Warrior and Contra. I've never had the opportunity to play them, so maybe I'll be able to in the future. I might get an NES myself. Nevertheless, it was a really awesome system. I'll definitely try to play more NES games in the meantime, so that the NES will have a better 30th anniversary video for me. So a happy 25th birthday to the NES, the system that saved video gaming as we know it. Without it, we'd probably be stuck with Atari.